targeted by Summit for its proposed hazardous pipeline?
Yes.
And did you cause to be filed in this matter what's known as pre-filed testimony that had certain questions and answers as well as attachments to that testimony?
Yes.
And rather than going through all of those with you verbatim again today, if we were to do that, would the answers you provide here to us today be substantially similar to those found in your pre-filed testimony, other than perhaps any minor clerical errors?
Yes.
And at this time, Doctor, do you have any updates or corrections that are material for the board to know?
No.
We would offer Exhibit 306.
Are there objections?
No objection.
Seeing no objection, the board will admit and give the way due.
Thank you. And Doctor, I don't know if you've been able to be following along, but at this time I'm going to pass you as a witness and other folks may ask you questions, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Taylor.
Thank you. Doctor, I'm Wally Taylor. I represent the Sierra Club. And do you own this property yourself, or is it through a trust, or what?
No, I own it with my wife.
Okay, good. Did you attend any informational meeting shortly after being notified of Summit's proposal?
No, sir. I live in Kansas, and because of my profession as a physician, I'm unable to travel much at all.
Okay.
So sorry, I was not able to.
That's all right. Have you had any contact or discussions with any agents or representatives of Summit?
Yes, my memory is not as clear or precise as the previous witness. But yeah, I believe they started coming to our house, was primarily what I remember the most. They would pull in the driveway and come to our house.
So they came to Kansas City?
I live in Lawrence, Kansas. They came to Lawrence, yeah.
Lawrence, okay, I'm sorry.
2, 3, 4 times, approximately.
Okay. What kind of discussion did you have with them?
They said that, are you aware about the pipeline? Here's an easement agreement for you to consider.
Okay. Did they try to give you any reasons why you should sign or anything like that?
Not that I recall.
Okay. So walk us through what discussions you have had with the Summit agents throughout the process.
I told them that I would, and my wife would look through their materials, and that if we had any questions, we would contact them. And I told them that we would certainly, hire an attorney before we signed anything, because this is not, the first time that someone wants to put a pipeline through our land. You can see the other one, of course, on that map you have up right now, just kind of below the proposed easement. And so we know that, we need to be informed of the process.
Okay.
Of course,
I'm sorry, go ahead, continue.
Yeah, but of course this is very different than the Dakota Access Pipeline. With that, we recognize that it was a utility. We recognize that if there was a leak, that there would be oil on the ground, and that would hurt the soil, and that we would be able to see it. And now the prospect is very, very different, because this is a threat that is odorless and invisible, and has the potential not just to hurt soil, but to kill somebody. So that's very, very concerning to us, especially given that you see that farm right to the south.
Yeah.
That's my great-grandfather's farm. We've owned this farm since the homestead deed. It's been continuously in our family. And so that farm you see down there, it's a couple in their late 60s, and they have their grandchildren over all the time. And you can measure it, but it's about 1,300 feet from the proposed pipeline down to their house. And it's even less to where they have about 1,500 head of cattle. That's very, very concerning to us. And it's especially concerning their health, but this, since the very beginning, through the Great Depression, through droughts, through the worst of hard times, this land has been the financial foundation of not me and my wife, generations and people unrelated even to the farm. And so the possibility, the very real possibility that we might not be able to find a tenant who'd be willing to farm this, because I've spoken to my own tenant about it, or that the rent that we receive on this is going to plummet. That's very real, because this, as a financial foundation, has always helped someone in need. And right now, it's helping my disabled sister. 100% of the money from the rent goes to my disabled sister so that she can keep food on the table, lights on in her house, heat in the winter. And this was our plan. It's been the plan for decades. And I even know that, how much is insurance going to cost? If I can get insurance, that's going to lower it even more. Probably we're going to have to maybe give a lot of that to the tract around it to the CRP. So this is very serious.
Yeah.
This is a lot different than the Dakota Access Pipeline.
So what has your tenant told you about his concerns if the pipeline is constructed?
Well, just to be very honest with you, he's worried about dying. He is salt of the earth. He's been our tenant for decades upon decades. My grandfather kind of handpicked him, and because he is really good to the land, and he's upset about this. I can hear that in his voice.
Did you ever talk to any Summit agents about an alternative route?
No, I did not. And I did not know that was possible until the pre-filed testimony. So I did in my in one of the attachments, exhibits, I put a alternative route.
Okay. But you never talked to a Summit agent about that?
No. And I have, in that exhibit, I talk about the least worst route. And basically what I tried to do with that least worst route is I put the alternative route right on that northern border of our land to get it as far away as humanly possible from that farm down below. I still think if you have the ability to measure it, you can measure it, but it's still, pretty darn close. Around, maybe you should measure it. Around, my recollection is, if I can look at my notes, around 2,700 feet. If it's all the way up there. The problem is, at least I've never seen a plume map, so I have no idea what's a safe distance. All I know is what I've heard about 8-inch pipes from navigators disclosing it. And at least what I've seen, I know in the easement it says up to 24 inches, but I've seen also where they anticipate this is going to be a 20-inch pipe. And you remember back to geometry in elementary school. It's 8 inches to 20 inches is not 2.5 times bigger. It's the radius squared. So it's a much, much bigger pipeline.
Okay. As a physician, what are your concerns about the safety of the pipeline?
So I'm a pediatrician. I've been a pediatrician for about 18 years. I'm board certified in pediatrics. I'm a fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics. I'm a professor, a full professor of pediatrics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Medicine. And what concerns me most about this is through the eyes of a pediatrician. And that is, this is a toxic gas that's heavier than air. So therefore, things closest to the ground are going to be more impacted. And if you think about children, they obviously are closer to the ground because of their height. Or if you even think about a toddler or an infant crawling around on the ground, or an infant in a pack-and-play, one of those portable cribs where they're kind of laying down close to the ground. So they are going to get a higher concentration of this carbon dioxide more than an adult would, who's 5 feet to 6 foot tall, because they're that much higher off the ground. In addition, what's a normal respiratory rate for me and you is up to 20 times a minute. So we breathe 20 breaths a minute. For a child, it can be up to 60 times a minute. So where they are and how fast they're breathing it in means, I would imagine, the exposure is going to be much higher. And the problem, as you know, with children is they either can't tell you because they're pre-verbal, or they're unable to actually tell you what is happening. So they might just start crying rather than saying, hey, I'm getting dizzy, or I'm feeling very nauseated, I have a headache. And so that's very concerning that the children might be impacted first or the most, and they do not have the ability to alert anyone.
Do you know how close the nearest emergency response personnel would be from your property?
Yeah, so Inwood, Iowa, is about 6 miles north. That's, a small town. And I believe, I could be mistaken, but I believe they are completely volunteer.
Yeah. You had mentioned that the Dakota Access Pipeline goes through this same parcel?
That's correct.
What about that experience informs your attitude toward the Summit Pipeline?
A couple of things. The most important is, when you go out to our land, you can see the dip, what I would call, at least in Kansas, we call a swell, from where the pipeline is. And, even it's a little bit harder to see because of the red on this map and that line, but you can see from space or wherever, from the air, where that pipeline's going. You can see the different color underneath that. And so in our family, we don't think about farming in terms of years. We think about it in terms of decades, half centuries, and maintaining the quality of the soil is incredibly important, because we know that we're not looking for money for tomorrow. We're looking to support people like my sister for years and years and years and years.
Aside from the dip or the swell, as you call it, was there any other impacts from the Dakota Access Pipeline that concern you about what would be the impact of the Summit Pipeline?
Not that I can think of offhand. Sorry.
I don't know if we finished talking about all of your contacts with the Summit agents, but did you ever actually discuss the easement with any of them, or discuss any other issues that you had concerns about?
No, no, but from my perspective, it's all like the easement paperwork. All of it has felt very preliminary. Maybe that's not the right term for it, but it's all felt very preliminary. For instance, it's how am I supposed to know what would be a safe area for the easement to be rerouted if I don't have any kind of plume information? And how am I supposed to know? I don't even understand who I would be signing this easement with. I don't know who owns this company. I know one of the owners is a South Korean firm that's been, pled guilty for fraud in infrastructure projects. But I still don't even know who the rest of them are. So, to put it in terms of a medical term, if you're having, the most complicated, long brain surgery, and this is one of the most complicated, longest ever CO2 pipes, you want to know who the surgeon is. And right now, no one's willing to disclose who the surgeon is. You want to know what the risk of the surgery are involved. And right now, no one's willing to say what the risks are. So it's hard to decide what are the options.
So in other words, before you do surgery, you inform the patient what the risks and likely outcome is.
Oh, absolutely, yes. To do otherwise would be absolute neglect, and certainly we would do that for things that have a much lower consequence than this.
Did you ask Summit for a plume model or some evidence of what the risk might be?
No, I have not, but I've just heard that they will not disclose it to the public.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have. Others may have questions.
Ms. Ryan?
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Colvin. My name is Anna Ryan. I represent Carrie Hurst, who is the daughter of a landowner in this proceeding. I just have a couple of areas I wanted to follow up with you a little bit on. When you got easement offers from Summit, did those include a dollar amount?
Yes.
Was that dollar amount anywhere near what you would need to compensate for the financial impacts that you described earlier?
No, not even close. And again, this is kind of our perspective, but in my perspective, with the possibility that I might have problems finding a tenant, that there's a very good chance that the rent might plummet, that I might be paying through the roof on insurance, that this property could go back, a lot of it go back to CRP. It's not even close. And even if current state as it is, it's less than 2 years of rent. So in our perspective, our long-term perspective, we're thinking about how long my sister's going to live. That's not a lot.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay. Ms. Hike?
Hello, Dr. Colvin. I'm Chris Hike, and I'm a landowner. Just a quick question: Did the land agents ever discuss or bring up eminent domain, or was the first received that information through the Exhibit H?
I believe believe it was through Exhibit H.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, with Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Colvin, I just have a couple of follow-up questions, mostly related to Dakota Access. The KMZ demonstrates the proposed Summit pipeline route. Is it accurate to say that the Dakota Access pipeline on your property is located roughly parallel to that route, but just to the south of that route depicted on the KMZ?
Yes, that's correct.
And does this farm also have a northern natural gas transmission line on it?
Yes, it does.
And that northern natural gas transmission line then is located roughly parallel to Dakota Access, but just south of Dakota Access. Is that fair?
I don't know that for certain.
Okay, thank you. I have no other questions.
Thank you. Mr. Jorde for redirect.
Yes, thank you. Can we zoom in on that KMZ a bit, please? Yeah, just a little bit more. Yeah, keep going a little bit more. Can you zoom in one more time, please? Okay, and then just move it up a little bit. Or sorry, the other way. Okay. Now, Doctor, as you look at that map, you can kind of see, can't you, the scars on the land from the prior pipelines? You can see that?
Yeah.
All right. And you had mentioned that the Dakota Access being a utility, something you can use, oil, and then also natural gas, and you obviously contrast those drastically to the proposed hazardous pipeline, correct?
That's 100% correct, yes.
All right. And part of that, among many other reasons, informs your opposition and concern about this proposed project, correct?
That's correct.
Now, Mr. Taylor asked you a question, did you ever ask Summit for a plume model, but it's fair to say you hired me to handle these things on your behalf, and you're aware that for many months and even in the last weeks, practically on a daily basis, we've been mentioning and requesting that data be provided publicly. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, that's exactly the case, and you said it much better. You articulated that much better than I did. Yeah, I knew that you were requesting those on my behalf, on behalf of all your clients in this matter. So, yeah, I wasn't actively going out to look at it because I knew I was paying someone to do that for me.
And in terms of the monetary, you mentioned your disabled sister. Obviously, if you felt you had to reduce the rent or the market for rents went down, obviously that is a direct and substantial negative economic impact to your sister, correct?
That's correct.
And you had mentioned potentially converting some of the ground or maybe all of it around the pipeline back to CRP, and obviously that would be a substantial net negative economic impact to your sister and your family.
That's absolutely correct.
And I suppose as a physician, doctor, you're familiar with the phrase "do no harm."
Yeah, and that, Mr. Jorde, that thought has been currently coming to mind repeatedly. Yeah, I'm very familiar with that.
And if you were looking at this potential project and giving a prognosis to a patient, that would be that it doesn't belong anywhere on your land or frankly anywhere nearby. Is that fair?
That is very correct. I would say, and to use my analogy, maybe it's a bad analogy, I would stay the hell away from that surgeon.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you, Dr. Colvin. You're excused. Mr. Jorde, we typically break for lunch at noon. Can we try to get through